Teachers of Reddit, what's the saddest thing a student has ever said to you? I had a very smart kid failing my class because he wasn't turning in any homework. When I asked him why, he told me he lived in a hotel room with 12 other people. There wasn't space, and it was too loud for him to focus. Gave them a writing prompt, would you eat a bowl of worms for 1K? Why or why not? Silly stuff can be a good way to get them going. Kid comes back with paraphrasing. Yes, definitely. The worms wouldn't be that bad. I'd probably just be sick for a few days. I'd be able to help my family with rent and electricity bills and help my cousins get out from the war in Sudan. Damn, kid. He'll be white when I grow up. 6-year-old foster kid. I had a student, 16, who would stay after school with me on Fridays and offer to help out in my classroom. She wasn't a particularly good student and didn't seem to like me, so I never understood why she stuck around. The following school year, her mother got arrested for prostituting her 3 daughters, including this student. I wish she had said something, or I had thought to ask questions. Not as horrifying as some of the other stuff here, but a student telling me that seeing stars is on her bucket list. She is 15 and the light pollution is so bad, there are no stars. Her family doesn't have a car. I cried after she left. 7th grade student lost an older brother to a drive-by. After a few months, I was told they had lost 2 other siblings the same way a few years earlier in elementary school. I substitute teach at a weekend school at a mosque. I got the class all teachers dread the middle school boys. They are all wild and like to test patience. Ramadan was beginning, and I was encouraging the boys to help out in the kitchen cause usually it's the moms that cook. One of them, a 6th grader, goes, I wasn't old enough to help when I had a mom, but I helped my grandmother when my dad and I visit. I still don't know what happened, but I know his mom died, and now it's just him and his dad, being buddies. I've heard much worse stories from these kids. A lot of them are refugees, and they heard and saw the most horrible things, and sometimes they process that by sharing. But this one really got me. I had to suspend a student for stealing. Couldn't get a hold of the parents on the phone, so I had to hand deliver the suspension letter to the parents. When I pulled up to the house, I found the remains of a burned out home. Turns out, the father and this student lived in the basement of the barely standing house. He stole the item to pawn so that they could have food for the upcoming vacation week. Kid was a real PETA, but I simply could not put him out. I heard he got stabbed in a fight a few years later. So sad. Student teaching. Talking to a kid about after-school plans. Kid said he was going to the park to play basketball because he couldn't go home until dark because his mom was a prostitute. Just matter of fact like he was telling me she was a dentist or a chef. I'm not a qualified teacher, I'm a mental health nurse, for my sins, but when considering my career options, I did take a year out of my first degree to teach. The base I worked at was for kids from non-standard academic backgrounds, i.e. had been expelled from mainstream education, and consequently labeled as challenging. So many of those poor sods described themselves, variously, as useless, unworthy, and the general consensus amongst the majority was why should I bother, when it'll never amount to anything anyway? One of my proudest achievements to date is that I helped this one kid create their CV, as they were struggling to sell themselves due to self-doubt. We worked together for ages to figure out what they felt their achievements were, etc. as she really wanted to do a job in home care for the elderly, mentally ill, and otherwise disadvantaged. She was so anxious about how she came across, it broke my heart. Now, she just registered her own home care company, has a brand new car, and is a successful businesswoman, probably bringing in more than me. I could not be more proud either. Way to go, kid. I teach a small group of SEN teens English, and one was getting really upset about their writing not being good enough. I told him that it'll get better as he gets older if he keeps trying, but I won't get older, why not? Mum says I will always be a useless child, broke my heart. The teens I teach have quite high-functioning autism, so they know that they are different, and they know that they can't do anything to change it. And then they have parents that say shit like that. I taught a mental health program for 4 years. I hold too many stories of abuse, overdoses, neglect, suicide attempts, and sexual assault. One of the saddest was learning about a student whose parent locked them in a cupboard when they were a toddler for hours at a time while the parent went out and partied. Mother was dying of breast cancer, all she wanted to do was make it to her son's graduation, she didn't make it. That the reason that my grade 12 student was falling asleep during math class was because he was working 40 hours a week to pay his parents' bills. I saw his pay stub. He was a great kid too. When I taught overseas, a student asked me how to cope with having no friends or family around. I was curious, and we talked about making new friends, adjusting to new environments, etc. and he shared that his parents sent him to that school because it was far away and had a dorm, and they were rarely in touch. Parents just paid tuition and sent living expenses monthly. He had a hard time fitting and I believe he was on the spectrum, but the country I taught in doesn't really believe in spec ed and had no friends. It broke my heart. I taught middle school. There was boy who was picked on and bullied because he smelled of urine. He was very quiet. One day after lunch, and a bad day for him. He mentioned in passing almost, he couldn't help it. His younger brother wets the bed. That was heartbreaking. My dad doesn't care about me, he only cares about his phone. This was said to me by a swimmer I was coaching a while back because their parent was glued to their phone. No matter how much they yelled for them to watch, they ignored them. Parents, please pay attention to your kids during their sports and extracurriculars. Handed me a note that said this is going to cause problems, but my dad said he was going to shoot me with his gun. We had already made a child abuse report 2 days prior because he had marks on his neck from his dad choking him. I spent a very late night that day keeping him company at the Children's Services office while they found a foster placement for him. A student disappeared for a few weeks. I found out later she tried to kill herself. Her mother's boyfriend had been raping her every night for years. She never came back to school. I remember one student in one of my classes telling the teacher, "You're a teacher, you have no emotions."